I would like to welcome all of you to the very first episode of Lipstick and Lore. I'm going to be your wonderful host into the spooky, unsolved, criminal, conspiratorial, and historical stories that plague my mind more than I'd like to admit. So go ahead and take your seats, grab your eats, and come along for the ride. And don't forget to subscribe. At this time, I'm just going to put a little bit of an informational disclaimer section, so if you want to go ahead and fast forward to the actual story, then I will put a timestamp of where that is, so you can go ahead and skip my yapping. But if you do want to stick around, I would appreciate it, because this is information that I believe is pertinent to this channel and the story. So I would just like to let you know that this is my first video on this channel and first video in this sort of style. So if it's not perfect, I'm trying, and I'm sure it'll get better as we go along. All right, stick with me. Basically what I do here in Lipstick and Lore is I pick a case that falls under the category of true crime, historical events, conspiracy theories, spooky stories, or things of that nature that I have heard about and want to talk about and want to talk with you guys about, because I love to yap. You're gonna find that out. I love to yap. And what I also love is true crime and makeup. So I figured might as well push all three together. Y'all can watch me do my makeup, because I know the attention spans these days. You gotta keep them entertained, so you can watch me do my makeup or pop me on your phone and your headphones or on your TV while you do your homework or clean your house or go for a walk. I don't know, whatever you'd like to do. And you can listen to me talk about a case that I find interesting and hope you will too. All the information that I gather, the sources will be linked in the description down below, as well as any other sources that I use, like documentaries or things like that. If I get information for any of those, they will also be linked down below. And if you guys have any questions about like the makeup portion, you can always ask in the comments, because I use a lot of products, so I probably won't link them all down below, but I can try. And also, I would like to thank you all for taking a chance and watching this video. I am a high school student, so this is like kind of crazy for me to do in a way. But I don't really have anybody else to share this with, so I figured I'd share it with you guys, and we'll see how it goes. Also, I'd like to put in a disclaimer that the stories that I cover on this channel might be disturbing to some viewers, and I don't recommend them for younger children. So if you do have younger siblings or children or cousins or whatever in the room, maybe don't watch this video. Why I don't cover anything graphic or go into graphic detail. I do cover crimes and disappearances and things that could be scary to younger viewers. Also, if you're eating, why this case might not upset you, some other cases in the future might, so maybe not the best thing to put on while you're trying to eat. Also, may not be the best thing to put on while you're home alone. So, viewer discretion is advised. Continue with caution. Don't say I didn't warn you. Now on to the actual video portion.
Handing it over to voiceover me. So we're going to get into today's case, and today's case is that of a missing persons case, and it is unsolved. So if that's not your cup of tea, go ahead and check out now. Everything discussed in this case is information that I have found online through videos, police documents, and different news sources. So if I do get something wrong, I do apologize, but this is what I found. So today's case is that of Brandon Swanson's. And who was Brandon Swanson? Brandon Swanson was a 19-year-old college student who went to Minnesota West Community and Technical College. He was a pretty average guy. I'll put a picture of him up on the screen to show you what he looked like. But he was considered friendly and quite laid back by most of the people who knew him. He was said to have a pretty normal childhood. He liked riding bikes, hanging out with his sister, watching movies, and he was considered above average intelligence, mostly in comprehending literature and English. And he was overall just your typical college student. And on the night of his disappearance, which was May 14th in 2008, he was attending a party on the Canby campus with some of his friends. It was saying that there was roughly 6 people at the party, and they were drinking slightly. It was said that Brandon had 1 beer, And later on in the night, he had one shot of whiskey, but his friends report that he was not drunk or inebriated. He was just a little tipsy, if that, but he had his wits about him. So around 9:45, Brandon decides he wants to go ahead and leave the party and starts driving. At 10:30, he visits his friend and has that shot of whiskey that I told you about previously. But Brandon's friend that he visited said that he wasn't drunk, he didn't seem out of sorts, and he seemed pretty typical Brandon. Brandon gets back in his car around 10:30 and starts driving on his way home. But instead of taking the highway, Brandon decides to take back roads through the more rural area of Minnesota. Some people speculate why he did this, but most people believe that it's because he wanted to avoid police encounters. But obviously, without Brandon being present, we will never know why he decided not to take the highway. So as Brandon is driving, he crashes his car into a ditch. And it's not damaged. Brandon's okay. He's not hurt. It's that the car is on an angle in the ditch and he can't drive it out without tow truck assistance or his parents coming to help him pull the car out. So when he crashes it into the ditch, he decides to call his friends, and after calling them a few minutes, which was around 1:15, nobody picks up, so he decides to call his father. His father picks up the phone, and Brandon calmly explains that he had crashed his car in a ditch somewhere around Lynn, Minnesota, which this would later be found to be false, because Brandon's car was found 25 miles in the opposite direction near Taunton, Minnesota, which is nowhere near Lynn. A lot of people speculate why Brandon thought he was in Lynn. Some people think maybe he was really disoriented from the crash and just said the wrong place. Some people think maybe he thought he took a wrong turn and went in the wrong direction. Some people thought he was more drunk than he was and didn't know where he was. But obviously, once again, without Brandon being present to tell us, we'll never know why Brandon thought he was in Lynn and not in Taunton. But at the time, his parents didn't know this. They thought he was in Lynn. So they get in the car and they drive to Lynn, and they're sitting there and they go, "Brandon, where are you?" And Brandon says, "I don't know. I'm right here. I don't see you guys." And so they start flashing their headlights, honking the horn, both Brandon's parents and Brandon, and they can't see each other. Nothing is heard, nothing is seen. So Brandon says, "Well, whatever. I see the lights of Lynn. I'm going to start walking." Brandon's parents stay on the phone with him. They're chatting, they're talking, and as they're walking, Brandon says that he can hear running water, and he's going to take a shortcut to get to the lights because he wants to get to Lynn, and he's just going to call them from there, and they're going to come pick him up, and it's going to be all okay. As Brandon is walking, he suddenly yells, "Oh shit," and the line went silent. Not dead, wasn't like he hung up, it was just silent. After a few minutes of calling his name, Brandon's parents decided to call him back a few times, and later in the investigation, Brandon's father says they did this because they believe maybe Brandon had tripped and dropped his phone and couldn't find it again, and lighting it up would help him find it, but obviously this wasn't the case because Brandon's never been found again. So these were believed to be Brandon's last words, or at least last heard words, and later police, after the parents called that night, told the parents that they should wait 24 hours, and it was believed that one of the officers, it was alleged by Brandon's mother, that one of the officers told them that Brandon had all the right in the world to be missing for as long as he wanted. This is obviously just alleged from her, and I can't confirm whether the officer said this or not, but it's kind of an interesting quote to think about. After they call the police that night, it doesn't get searched into till at least the next morning when they call again and ask for a search to be done. And they did explain to the officers that night of what happened to Brandon in his last words in the phone calls, but nothing was investigated until the next morning. After the investigation started, they did find Brandon's car 25 miles in the opposite direction in Taunton, Minnesota, in a ditch. The car's doors were open, and inside the car was Brandon's glasses, which some sources say. Other sources say that it was his wallet and his glasses, so I can't confirm, but it does seem like his glasses were found in the car, which is interesting because Brandon was hard of vision, so it would be hard for Brandon to see, especially at night, without his glasses. But all the doors were open, there was no signs of a struggle, there's no blood, there's no sign of injury. The car was literally just stuck in a ditch, and it would be easily removed if he had help or a tow truck or something like that. So basically after this, police don't really know where to go. So they start searching the area, which is mostly farmland and, mostly river and all stuff like that. So as they're looking, they don't really find any sign of Brandon, which was interesting to think about because, well, if someone goes missing, typically there's some evidence of that person around where they are said to have gone missing from. But there was nothing. So police decide that instead of just combing the grounds with search parties, they were going to go ahead and bring in cadaver and scent dogs. So they bring in scent dogs, and the scent dogs track Brandon through the river near Taunton and onto the bank on the other side, which was interesting, and some police wrote off as a false report of scent, but some people do believe that maybe Brandon did in fact fall into the river and actually wake up and walk through the other side and walked somewhere. But obviously this can't be confirmed nor denied. So after he's reported missing and police find no damage in the car or no signs of a struggle or foul play, they decide to say that Brandon walked off on his own. That is what most police officers believed during this time. They believed that he had gone missing. Like, he just decided he didn't want to be around anymore and walked off. Though his parents and friends disputed this heavily because they knew Brandon and knew that he wasn't the type of person to just wander off. Which, I don't know Brandon, but from what I've heard, he doesn't sound like the guy to just wander off. Especially if you're going to wander off and disappear, why would you call your parents? Wouldn't you just disappear if you really wanted to? But obviously this is just my opinion, and I can't confirm or deny. Searches were done by police and search parties up to a month after Brandon's disappearance. They searched air, land, and water. They installed grates into the river to try to see if they could find some belongings of Brandon or if they could find Brandon himself. And at this point, they were looking for a body or Brandon as a full living person. Later in 2023, this river was actually drained. Well, the part of it that was around where Brandon went missing, and nothing was found. And it was drained due to drought, and there was farming issues, and nothing was ever found. Another thing to note about this police work is that they searched the farmland around, but they didn't do thorough warranted searches because most of the farmers said that they didn't want their land searched due to scaring their cattle or stomping on their crops, or they didn't want the police around, and they couldn't obtain a search warrant for all these properties because there was so many of them, and it's a very difficult thing to attain a search warrant for a whole farm and multiple whole farms. But they did do vague searches of all these farm properties, and they didn't find any sign of Brandon. They interviewed his friends and family to see if they could figure out anything, but in the end, there was no sign of Brandon, and they couldn't figure out where he was or what happened to him or, what could have happened to him. But they did do their best in trying to figure out where he was, and the parents believe that the police could have done more, and the police believe that they did enough. So it's really a dispute on whether the police work was amazing or the police work was not that great. But Brandon's parents tell you that they should have done more and that they shouldn't have waited 24 hours or at least till the morning to report their son missing, because even though he's 19 years of age, given the circumstances of what happened in the call, it's something that seemed pressing and seemed like it needed to be addressed right away. And this case now, 16 years later, is closed, and they still take tips, and they still take sightings, and they still take, any information that people have, but they aren't actively searching for Brandon, and they put it off as just a willing disappearance, which to Brandon's family was sort of a slap in the face because they know Brandon didn't just wander off that night, and they do know that something happened to Brandon. They just don't know what. So now I'm going to get into some of the conspiracy theories about what happened to Brandon, because there's not a lot of information on what happened to Brandon. Like, that's pretty much all the information that there is out there. And that's the whole case. That's everything to be said about Brandon. That's literally it. It's just he walked off and disappeared, is what the police would tell you. The phone call, the 911 call, it was all just like, that's it. There's nothing else to add to that. So I'm going to go ahead and get into some of the theories that online sleuths and friends of Brandon and Brandon parents and some officers believe could have happened to him. And one of the biggest one that police believe is accidental drowning. So they believe that Brandon had fallen into the Yellow Medicine River, which was the river in Taunton, and drowned. And where this seems maybe like a likely story, Brandon's father says that he never heard splashing. He never heard a thud or anything. The line literally just went silent. So you'd think if Brandon did in fact fall into the river, there'd be some sort of splash or noise or something. It wouldn't have just been his words and nothing. It would have had some sort of noise indicating that he fell into the river. So most officers believe that if it was an accidental drowning, his last words make sense because obviously he was surprised and got startled. But some things to discredit this theory is that there's no evidence of Brandon found in this river. And even the scent dogs followed his scent from the river out of the river, which could be a false scent. Scent dogs get it wrong sometimes. But it is interesting, given the other evidence to discredit this theory, that maybe Brandon didn't fall into the river and drowned. Because obviously if you drowned, there's going to be a body or your belongings or something. Another theory that they believe is criminal abduction. So some online sleuths believe that maybe somebody got Brandon. I mean, there's crazy people out there. It happens more often than you think. Like, it's not just children or women that get kidnapped. Dudes get kidnapped too. And so some believe that a criminal took him. But this is sort of unsupported by the evidence because obviously there was no signs of a struggle or a violent crime by his car, nor near where Brandon possibly went missing in the area. But obviously it is still a possibility that someone drove by and took him. Unlikely because the roads that he was on were not really used that much that time of night, but obviously it's not impossible to think that somebody could have taken Brandon. But obviously if he was, wouldn't there be a body or something or some kind of evidence to support that he was taken? And the phone call also doesn't make sense. The line just going silent. Maybe he didn't get abducted. Maybe it was something else. And also, we don't know if that theory is true, we don't know if Brandon would have been held hostage or being held captive or sold into trafficking or he was killed. We really don't know. So that theory leads to a lot more questions than answers. Another theory is the farmer theory. Some think that Brandon wandered onto a farm while following the lights that he thought was Lynn. A lot of people believe that they were farm lights, that they were farm equipment, and maybe he got stuck in some farm equipment, or maybe unsuspecting farmers got startled and shot him, because obviously you don't expect somebody to be walking in your field in the middle of the night. Or maybe a farmer who didn't like trespassers shot him and hid his body somewhere because they didn't want to be involved in a murder. Some people also believe that he fell into the river, got disoriented, and wandered onto a farm, and then got shot, or then fell, and then died of, the elements, and the farmer found his body and dragged it and hid it somewhere because they didn't want to be involved in this crime, which this theory does have credit to it because most of the farmers did not let police do thorough searches of their land, and a lot of the farmers refused to let the scent dogs step onto their land, which is a little suspicious in my opinion. I mean, if you have nothing to do with something, you might as well be an open book, but obviously, they gave their reasons, which were scaring the cattle, trampling on their plants or crops, and a lot of the farmers in rural Minnesota just don't really like police. I mean, I don't want my place being searched by police, but obviously if there is a missing person, you think you'd want to do as much as you can to help. This is the most widely believed theory because a lot of the farmers were standoffish, especially to police and journalists, and also because he was in the completely wrong area and the scent dogs tracked him out of the river, and it's likely that there is a person involved because his remains or himself was never found. So it's likely that somebody disposed of them or he was disposed of in some way because there is no remnants of Brandon. A couple other theories that I'm just going to list just to, kind of put it out there is some internet sleuths believe that maybe he was abducted by aliens. Maybe aliens took him. because people don't just disappear without a trace like that. And maybe that's why the phone had no other noise on it, because he just got zapped up into a spaceship. Maybe it was because he was walking and entered a portal and got abducted that way. Or maybe it was because, there was a UFO and Brandon saw it and ran after it. So some people do believe that it's something more supernatural or alien-like, and some people think that maybe it was, like a Bigfoot kind of creature or something like that it was some sort of cryptid that took Brandon, and that's why there was sort of no sightings and no anything like that. While I don't know if I personally believe this, I do think it is a theory that a lot of people online believe and accredit to this case, so I thought it was important to talk about. And then, of course, the theory that the police thought in the beginning was the runaway theory. Maybe Brandon wanted to start a new life. Maybe Brandon was tired of college, or tired of his friends, or tired of his family, or tired of being an average guy and wanted to leave and run away and disappear. And that very well could be true. I mean, there's plenty of cases where people run away and start new lives and don't tell anybody because they don't want to deal with it. I mean, it's an option, definitely. But I don't know if it's the most feasible option. Another is maybe he ran away on accident. Maybe Brandon fell in the river, walked out, was so disoriented he just kept walking. He just walked off somewhere and never came back because he just didn't know who he was or where he was. And maybe he, is living out somewhere and doesn't have any idea who he is and doesn't know what to do, or he just started a whole new life on accident. Maybe he was so drunk he fell in the river, hit his head on a rock or something, got up and walked away. Because the river wasn't that deep. It was about knee deep. And so the likelihood of him falling in, hitting his head, and getting back up is pretty likely. So maybe he ran away on accident. Maybe it wasn't even on purpose. Some people believe ghosts were involved. And some people believe that he was abducted by like a spirit or followed a spirit somewhere, and that's why he left, and that's why there was no trace of him or no sounds on the phone, and maybe that's why he yelled startled because he saw something creepy like that. And then some people believe maybe he was the victim of a serial killer, because some people believe that Brandon was the victim of the smiley face killer, which was the string of killings that were of college-age boys by bodies of water with smiley faces found by their remains. And a lot of people believe that maybe this is what got Brandon. Maybe Brandon was another victim of these awful, awful crimes, because they happened in many different states across many different counties, and they were all by a body of water. They were all Brandon's age. They fit Brandon's description, and the only thing that's different is Brandon was never found, and maybe that was on complete accident. Maybe Brandon is out there somewhere and there's a smiley face by him, and maybe he really is a victim of this mysterious serial killer that was never caught. And if you guys want a video on that, I can totally do some research into the smiley face killer. It's something that intrigues me as well, because it is sort of like Brandon's case in the way where these people disappear for a little while and then show back up, unfortunately, unalived, and it's sort of who did it, So if you guys want a video on that, I can totally do one. Just let me know in the comments. But back to Brandon, some people believe that maybe he ran away with a lover. Maybe he found someone and he left, and he wanted to go live out his life with her, and his parents wouldn't have approved. But his parents and friends don't believe that he was abducted by aliens or that he was a runaway. A lot of them believe that someone took him, or that it was something, or that he got shot by the farmer or got stuck in some farm equipment. His mother believes that the lights that he was following were actually silo lights, because it was known that a lot of the farms out there had large silos with large lights on them that could be almost confused as city lights, because Brandon was in fact not by Lynn. So maybe he was seeing silo lights and went out there and he stumbled onto a farmer or something, or maybe even into a well, because a lot of farmers will dig illegal wells And if they find water, they report them. If they don't find water, they don't report them, and they're just holes in the ground, you know? Or maybe even he stumbled into some cattle and just died in a cattle area and got eaten or just decomposed. But the truth is that we don't really know what happened to Brandon. Unfortunately, with the case being pretty much closed, we don't know if we'll ever know what happened to Brandon. Could it be one of these theories? Could it be a theory we haven't thought about? Could it be any sort of other thing? Maybe he fell into a sinkhole. Maybe he just disappeared. Like, it really is just if as the earth swallowed him up, if it just opened and swallowed Brandon, because there's no struggle, there's no scream, there was nothing. It was just, oh shit, and gone. It really is mind-boggling to think about, and it's a case that keeps me up at night. And I know it's a case that keeps a lot of people up at night. And I think the main reason for this is just the mystery behind what happened to Brandon Swanson. And I think it also has something to do with the fact that a lot of people believe there was some sort of internet cover-up or investigative cover-up or some sort of media cover-up for Brandon's case. Many people can't wrap their minds around someone disappearing without an explanation, without any sort of rhyme or reason or anything. People can't seem to understand that. So a lot of people came up with something that does make sense in their brain, which is first and foremost a police cover-up, which I'm not so sure is the best possible thing to go to first, but it is what a lot of people believe, because them making Brandon's parents wait to file the police report and report Brandon as a missing person, a lot of people believe that that makes it a cover-up and that they didn't want to investigate it and that they knew more than they were letting on to, especially when they didn't get the search warrants for all the farms, and they believe that the police were either not trying hard enough or were covering something up. Whether you believe that or not is completely up to you. It's just some things that sources told me. Not only that, but some people believe there's a media cover-up, where that media just didn't want to cover this. I mean, even doing research for it, there is not a lack of coverage, but not a lot of official coverage, I guess I would say. There's not a lot of news stories out there, but to be fair, it is from 2008, so there might not be as many news stories put out on the internet because a lot of them probably weren't taped back then. I mean, it was 16 years ago, so it things get lost to time and history, and technology advances, and people don't film things, and it's just, it could very well just be things being lost to time, or it could be some sort of media cover-up that some people believe. But either way, what happened to Brandon Swanson is still a mystery, and I think I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that Brandon was a real person, and he's not just a case or a story or a conspiracy. He was a real person who went missing May 18th, 2008, and his family lives every single day with that reality. I mean, I'm sure there's not a day goes by that they don't think about Brandon, that they don't think about what happened to Brandon. And I think that's a pain that most people won't understand. Because even in true crime cases where they are found alive or unfortunately deceased, there's closure, or where the killer gets caught and they end up in jail or deceased, or whatever, they get their time, or whatever happens, there's closure. You know what happened to your loved one. You know where they went missing or how they went missing, or if they were a runaway, or what theories were true. But for Brandon's friends and family, they just don't know what's true and what's not. And this case is just, it's one that is probably in my top 5 of ones that I think about weekly. Like, I lay awake at night and think, what happened to Brandon Swanson? And there's a lot more of these. There's so many cases of people just disappearing and never showing up again, and there's just no trace of them. And I think it's a phenomenon that is just so strange and so common that it's almost weird how common it is. And I think one day we'll be able to figure it out, and that would be extremely amazing for me and for all the families of these victims. And yeah, I just hope one day they find Brandon and they figure out what happened to him, because there's not a lot of evidence or coverage or anything like that. It's just sort of, where did Brandon go? So that's pretty much it for the main case and the theories and everything like that. But I do want to talk about some of the aftermath of Brandon's case, because there was some good that came out of this, despite all the bad. They ended up, well, Brandon's parents and one of the Congress people for their state came together and made a law called Brandon's Law. And it is so when you call to make a police report for a missing persons, no matter what the age or what circumstance, you do not have to wait 24 hours or until the morning or at all to report them missing. You can report them missing right away, and they are filed as an official missing persons. And they put this law through in Minnesota, and I think it is something that should have been prominent the whole time. I don't think there is anything that should stop somebody from reporting their loved one missing, because 9 times out of 10 with these cases, it is, they could have been saved if the police had done faster. And I think that's just a fail in our justice system, because waiting 24 hours, I mean, those 24 hours are important to finding someone. I mean, it could rain, it could snow, evidence could be covered up, the person could come back and cover up the evidence. You know, things can get moved, animals can move stuff. I mean, maybe they have a chance of still being alive. I think Brandon's Law is an incredible thing that they made out of a tragedy. Because, I mean, truly, Brandon's disappearance is a tragedy for his friends and family, and they made something positive out of it. And I love in true crime cases when people do that. I think that is the best thing you can do in this situation, because honestly, what else can you do? He's missing. He's gone to time. We may never know what happened to Brandon Swanson, but at least the next person that goes missing won't have to wait 24 hours to report their loved one missing. And I think that is an amazing thing that his parents put together. And I think this case is very wild and very interesting, and I really hope I did it justice.
Man, what a case. What a case. What happened to him? What happened to Brandon? I mean, will we ever know? Will it ever be solved? I hope so. I would hope for his family and everyone that it is solved one day, and that it'll shed some light on why people disappear without a trace, because it happens more often than you think. And if you guys have any suggestions for cases or stories you'd like me to cover, you can go ahead and put it down below. If you guys have any critiques on the video, you can go ahead and put them down below, kindly, please. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you want to go ahead and let me know what you think happened to Brandon, go ahead and put it down below, because I will be reading the comments, because I don't really have anything else other to do. And I'm really excited to see what you guys have to think. I want to build a community here. So thank you for watching and listening to me yap. And I hope you'll come back for the next one. I'll try to post on Saturdays, but we'll see how it goes, you know, school and everything. But I love you guys. I hope you have an amazing day, because you can, and because you should. And I will see you in the next one.